Welcome to ComSpark TV. I'm Lisa Kagy, today live from Columbus, Ohio. Today we are meeting with Brian Shea, MBX Medical Billing Experts, a U.S. radiology company, and had a couple questions for you today.
Sure, sounds good.
Great. So how do you change security to a culture?
Yeah, so that's a good question. It's not something that's easy by any means. Traditionally, security has been thought of as the people that are preventing things or slowing down things within organizations as things are trying to get implemented. I think that culture has changed a lot over the past probably couple of years, 2 to 3 years, probably in the more recent, for sure, especially as people at work are dealing with this stuff now at home, right? So they're getting constant emails or text messages that their social security number has been suspended and to call what 800 number to get that fixed. So I think it's now constantly in everybody's face a little bit, which has helped the transition in the work environment. In the past, we used to throw just walls at it, basically, and technology to say, you can't do this, right? But people always find a way to do things, in the work environment that make them faster or easier, or just trying to get around the rules or maybe bend the rules a little bit. So, technology is one thing. Companies spend millions of dollars on technology to prevent things from a security side, and that's great. But the reality is, all that technology doesn't mean anything if one person gets an email and they click on it really quickly and just causes disruption within your organization. And then you flip to this mitigation mode at that point in time of trying to defend, what they've done or figure out even what they've done. So I said the biggest thing is really getting with the staff and making it part of what they do. I've always said, as I've done these things is, companies are going to fail if they say, we're going to be secure now. Right? And they treat it that way. It's one thing to put focus on and it's one thing to invest in, but it's really got to be a part of what you do every day. It's got to be ingrained into how you operate as an individual and how you operate as an organization. So taking those steps it's a lot of education. It's a lot of legwork in making the people feel that they're a part of it and that it's not a nuisance, that you're actually you're helping them, right? And as I said, what's made that easier is just that influx in everybody's everyday life. No different than consumerization of a cell phone, how they came out and not everybody had smartphones, to begin with. And then they started getting into work and people wanted their work email and wanted to do all these things at work with it. That same kind of concept with security is that it's part of their everyday life now. So they're a little bit more aware. We could leverage technology to put things maybe more visually in their face. Hey, look out, here's a red stop sign, maybe I should think about it. Because the reality is people are working so fast, they just click through things, many times, and especially a lot of these that look so legit, that it's coming from a coworker, or maybe they've ordered something from Amazon, right? And they're expecting a package, so they click on it. So it's getting people to slow down, a little bit and think as they're going through those things, because it's not only disruption to themselves potentially, but also to the entire organization. And in many times there's ramifications within organizations now within their policies that if you took those steps and you did something wrong, you could potentially be penalized, as an employee or terminated, in many cases. So the culture, again, it's treating it as, again, it's not a punishment. Also getting people to understand when companies do these phishing campaigns to see, are people going to click on something? What do they do? You don't want to use those tools as a punishment tool. You want to use those tools as an educational tool to show them of, hey, did you think about this? This wasn't really a real thing. You need to be cautious on what you're doing and use it from that approach versus you're just penalizing somebody or calling them out in front of everybody that they did something wrong, because you'll never win, in an organization with that kind of culture. It's got to be a continual education culture around security. And I think it's making people feel, comfortable that it's okay to ask questions, that they're not sure what something is, if it's legit or not legit. I'm a big proponent of picking up the phone, call somebody. If you're not sure if they actually sent you something, go to the source first. When you receive emails for things that are asking you to do something, I like to go to those source systems and really see, is it truly there versus what I'm getting in an email communication. IRS type things, of course, they're going to mail you something in the physical mail. Mm-hmm. They're not going to send you a text message or leave you a voicemail that you're going to go to jail, or they're suspending something. So it's just slowing down, thinking about those things. As I said, the culture has gotten easier to change, as I said, because of people are just, it's in their face so much. Now, the biggest issue with that is just there is so much, right? So people need to figure out, how do I decipher all these different things that are coming at me and not get to a point where they're just becoming paralyzed or numb to it and don't respond to anything, right? And you might have valid things that are actually coming in that are getting ignored because people are just unsure or they're afraid to ask, what these things are. So I think the biggest thing, again, going back, is changing that culture, is making it a safe kind of culture, making it educational, continuing to use tools and technology to help prevent those things from ever getting to the point, or they come in, but they're not 100% and they never will be. So it's how to use those visual aids or the technology to block things, but making sure the biggest thing, any security thing will always tell you your linkest wink is the individuals or the people. So it's going to be continual education. Continually making them feel comfortable, making sure there's an environment where they are telling you about these things that come in, so you're aware about them, and then you could broadly communicate and share with others that look out for this, right? Mm-hmm. So I think those are the biggest things. There's no smoking gun to change the culture in security. I think things are changing a lot, or at least from what I've seen, and I think it's more so, as we talked about, that it's people are just seeing it so much now. There's just so much of it going on that it becomes part of their regular life, which then transitions into they're seeing it at work and they're having to deal with it at work.
So in communication, education, and how do you deal with a geographically separated workforce then? So,
and layering on security, right? Which makes that very difficult at times. And I think the reality is most organizations are becoming more and more geographically diverse, and that could either be through companies that are being acquired by other companies, so their workforce continually is changing and where it's located. And there are also a lot of companies now are leveraging, managed services partners and resources that are either within the U.S. or outside of the U.S. And you have to communicate with these folks to be effective. I'm not, as I said before, I'm a big advocate of communicating and speaking, actually using words, right? And it could be, not necessarily on the phone, it could be a Teams meeting or Skype meeting. And most organizations that I've seen be successful in collaboration they know when to have meetings, right? You can quickly become paralyzed by over communicating, or you could quickly become paralyzed where you're having so many people in meetings all the time and they're not actually getting the opportunity to work on the things that are more important to the organizations or them, or themselves. So it's finding, a balance of working on the important things, having tools in place to be able to communicate effectively. You don't want people that are hiding behind email. I've seen more delays in projects and things getting done because people just email somebody, and then you add on geographically diverse, where you're emailing people in different time zones, and then you could be a day later, on getting a response, and it wasn't even the response that you wanted to get, or they didn't answer the question, that was in the original communication, for instance. So I've always found it to be better to be tactical and get the folks communicating that need to communicate on a call, like a Teams meeting or a Skype meeting or GoToMeeting, whatever that mechanism is, and getting them all on the same page, having a kind of not a meeting for meeting, but having a very tactical meeting, set agenda of here's what we're trying to resolve, get to the point of what you're trying to resolve, and then get everybody back off, the meetings. So dealing with time zones, dealing with different communication styles. Some folks just aren't comfortable speaking, on the phone versus they are in writing. And that's difficult. That could be generational. It could be just personality type. It could be whatever. And that is difficult to do, to find that happy medium. So I think you also have to be giving in that communication style and tools that you have that you allow for some of those different interactions. I think you're seeing more companies trying to move away, as they have for years, trying to move away from traditional email to more collaborative type tools like Teams, where they could pull people in quickly, or people could communicate at different points in time, but yet everybody is seeing it in real time if they want to on current status of things. But they also could use the instant messaging mechanism, which I find most people are kind of navigating and migrating to versus traditional email. There's a lot of people you talk to now that are coming into IT, and you talk to them about email, and they're like, well, who uses email? And they only use email or sign up for email because you need an email address to sign up to purchase something versus using it as their main communication mechanism. People are looking for that instant communication. Now, that is also a balancing act, because all of a sudden you have now a multitude of people communicating to you instantly at one time. So what is that expectation level back to respond to instant messages, because that's how they can communicate to you now. So again, that's another expectation where we're going to see a culture change, I think, in where people are going to expect immediate responses when they're sending you an instant message, versus you might be tied up in other things, and you may not get back almost in the same time period you were getting back to in traditional email. So getting back to, I know the original question, geographically diverse staff, I think it's going down to, again, good effective communications, knowing how to communicate, learning your teams, and determining what is the best method for it. No method is necessarily wrong. It's really learning your team that needs to be involved and pulling them in, using those different mechanisms that are most appropriate, I guess, for your organization.
Sure, and this takes a great deal of focus and a great deal of engagement as well from all team members. So how do you deal with organizational change?
Yeah, so dealing with the organizational change, again, a lot of companies are going through this right now. Even my own organization has gone through an evolution over the past couple of years where, you have private equity firms now in the mix where are purchasing a lot of organizations, or smaller organizations are merging together to find ways to survive or be competitive. So I think the biggest thing there, is really dealing with the organizational change also has that personal component of it, which is probably just as critical as the business side. So how do you manage people through an organizational change? And in the technology side, that could be a challenge in itself. So you have individuals that may, again, be geographically separated, that may only see each other on a Skype meeting. Maybe they see each other physically once a year, if at all. And then you're dealing with the emotion of change just from a personality perspective of, you go through that cycle, I guess, as you go through a change, let it be an organizational change or a personal change, that there's that fear factor, of what does this mean for me, right? So individuals have to go through, how does this impact me directly? And then once they start getting over that, and how to get over that is you have to be transparent as much as possible, and everybody says, you have to be transparent, but you can only be as transparent as much as you can. There's things you can't share at particular points in time, or you can share bits and pieces over a period of time. But I think the most important thing is to be open and honest with your employees, making sure that they feel that they do feel valued. And again, that goes back to, you have to understand each of those personality types and what makes those individuals tick. Because the last thing you want is people leaving an organization as you're going through organizational change and managing that change management. You need to find a way to keep those people engaged, that they feel that a part of the now, but they also feel a part of a bigger picture. So if a larger organization comes in, they want to feel like, I'm no longer, I'm not just in this little realm that I managed before. What are my opportunities to be a part of that bigger picture of the organization? And it's the leader's responsibility to make sure that those individuals feel that way, that they are getting heard and their voices are kind of going up to the larger organization, because it is easy sometimes to, get caught in the, just in the speed of things that are occurring, and, forget that somebody, some of your key people that are doing some of your day-to-day activities, that you expect that it's happening and it's there, and you don't have any like ill will, or anything like that, but it's how do you get them to feel that they're a part of it? Again, I think that's through open communications, it's through collaboration. And again, that's not an easy task, right? And there's personalities that are just not going to be able to accept change, right? Or work in a period of gray grayness, as things evolve. So managing that change, I think it's being fair, again, being as transparent as you possibly can, communicating frequently, with individuals. And again, most people like to hear it from you, right? Or hear you say something versus something in an email, right? Because if you verbally can relay what your vision is or where you're going, people could usually buy in and relate to that a lot better. Because everybody knows email does not have tone, right? So everybody likes to put their own tone on email communications or instant messaging, where you get something and it might have been a short, direct email, and you're like, wow, they're yelling at me, or they're not including me, they're not giving me a lot of information. But the person who sent that, they might have been, completely like, I'm just trying to keep it short. I'm just trying to be direct. Just want to make sure, people know what's going on. And depending on that person's state of mind, completely can be interpreted differently. So I have found that being able to verbally state your vision, your direction, what you're trying to do is more powerful than anything you could do in writing. And that helps manage that change management piece of things. But like I said, I think it's being as clear, concise, transparent as you can, but doing that in a world that you might not have all the answers, right? Because you yourself are going through that transition of trying to figure things out. I mean, some of these are new things that you're navigating, that you're learning as you go. So you don't have all the answers sometimes as a leader or an organization on what's happening. And some of that has to just unfold as you go. So it's, again, trying to find that happy medium where you can communicate to staff and making them feel safe, making them feel engaged, making them feel like they have a direction and a purpose and are valued. Those are things that people want, right? In employment. So it's finding that and engaging that into your change management process. A lot of companies fail, at doing that, because they might be great, on the business side of where they're going, and they're very focused and they're doing those things and moving forward, but they forget about the folks that are helping them, actually getting them to where they need to be. So I think it's critical to really intertwine, that change management and that personality and people side of things, for sure.
Sure. All very, very big things and very complicated things. So I appreciate you sharing with us today, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
For more information, check out ComSpark.tech.